Hello everyone and welcome to this overview of Drum Synth. Drum Synth is an electronic drum synthesizer that, according to the Logic User Guide, is meant to add fills, flourishes, and to augment existing content. It's also useful for sample replacement as well. However, I will not be using it in this context. Instead, I'm going to make an 8-bar beat for you guys to show you how versatile this plugin can be. Full disclosure, I do have a limiter on the stereo bus so we can avoid clipping. For this first track, I'm going to lay an 808 part down, as that's what we get by default. I'll go ahead and open up the instrument window using Command-Option-Grav.
808, dialog. 808, dialog.
And then hit VO end to go to the table.
Table, sound category, kicks, selected.
So a few things to take note. There are 4 different sound categories. There are kicks, snares and claps, percussion, and hi-hats and cymbals. Each category has a set number of modules, and each module has its own set of controls. The nice thing about Drum Synth is that, say you're messing with a snare, you do whatever you need to do to it and want to test something else out. So you switch to a different snare module, tweak that, and realize that you like the first sound. If you switch back to it, Drum Synth will remember your settings. So let's get started with the default patch. I'm going to bring up musical typing with Command K.
Musical typing -808, dialog.
This is what we get by default.
Untitled 808, dialog. 808, dialog.
I just did Command-Option-Grav twice quickly to hide the instrument window and bring it back so it's over the top, and so now when I mess with these controls, I still have access to musical typing.
Table, sound category, kicks.
So these 3 controls at the top are always going to be the same: sound category, sound module, and pitch.
Sound module pitch 0, 50%.
Pitch goes from -24 to +24 semitones, and it's useful in the case that you don't have key tracking as an option, so you can tune your kit piece to better fit your composition.
Tone 0.0%, 0%.
So this says tone. In this case, we're on a pure sine wave.
In 0.0%, and slider.
If we move the tone slider to 100, we'll get more of a sawtooth.
5%, 85%, 90, 95, 100%.
As you can hear, it's a different wave position. We'll back it up to, like, why don't we do 30%?
95, 50%, 35, 30%.
Next control is saturation.
Out of, saturation 0.0, in 0%, and slider.
Saturation is just harmonic distortion being added to your signal. Right now, at 0, it's a very clean signal. If we put it to 100, however,
5%.
it's a very distorted and dirty signal. It's nice to make your kicks cut through on smaller speakers such as laptops and phones. I like to add some of this on top just so we can have a little bit more clarity when we start adding more elements.
95, 45%, 40%. 30, 25%. 20%. 15%. 25%.
I think I like 25. Let's move on to the next control.
Out of slider. Shape 30.2%, 30.2%.
Shape basically is a pitch modulating down. So if you can hear the click in the beginning of this kick, that's a very short sweep downward, which is the next control. These 2 controls go hand in hand. It's literally like peanut butter and jelly. Sweep adds resonance, where shape adjusts how exaggerated you want your click to be. So for example,
in 30.2 and slider.
Right now we're at 30.2%. If we go all the way to 100,
35.
It's very, very much exaggerated and slowed down.
95, 30%. 20%. 15%.
So usually I set mine around 15 or 20%, depending on how heavy I want the click of the kick to be.
Out of slider, sweep 74.1%.
And you see how the sweep is at 74.1%?
And slider.
If we move it to 100 with a shape at 15%,
70.
You'll notice that the click has a lot more definition now. And that's because we added the maximum amount of resonance. If we move it to 0,
95.
You can tell that there's still a little bit of pitch modulation going on with the initial transient, but not as much.
5%. 90%, 80%. 70%, 65%. 60%. 45%. 40%. 55%.
I think I like 55.
Out of slider. Decay 53.7%. 53.7%.
Decay is just a release. If we put it to 0, it sounds more plucky, but if you put it to 100, you'll have sustain for days. I'll show you.
In 53.7%. In slider 48.
That's 0.
5%.
And that's 100. Depending on what genre you're going for, it's nice to have this control here so you can adjust your release time.
95. 55%. 45%. 55%.
Let's leave it at 55 for the moment.
Out of. Volume 0 decibels. 75%.
Volume is pretty self-explanatory. You can go down to -18 and go up to +6.
Key tracking checked.
Key tracking is what allows us to have these pitched kicks. So if I turn it off,
Unchecked.
I'm hitting a D note, but it's still in G. I'm hitting an F note an octave higher, but it's still in G. I'm going to hit the same two keys that I just hit
Checked.
with key tracking on, so you can hear the difference.
Mode. Mono.
The mode selector will always be available no matter what module you have set. What you've been hearing so far is monophonic. So if I play a note and then play another note, it's going to cut off the first note even though I'm holding that key down and play the second note. Polyphonic
Menu poly. Mode. Poly.
allows us to have both keys playing simultaneously. Very clashy, I know.
Menu gate. Mode. Gate.
So with the gate mode active, the note will play as long as you keep the key held down. So you can hold it for the duration of your sustain, or you can do that. Let's go ahead and lay something down. Let's hit Q to quantize.
Quantize selected region /cell /events.
And play back. Let's fix that. I'm going to go ahead and close this window with Command W.
Untitled. Logics. Untitled. Tracks. Window. Tracks.
Get rid of musical typing with Command K. Didn't say anything because it was in the background. Hit I for the inspector.
Inspector on.
And then go to the end of this region with Control End. And that would be Control Function right arrow if you're on a laptop keyboard.
9 bars 1 D1 division 1 tick.
Now let's go back to 7 bars by hitting comma twice.
8 bars 7 bars 1 D1 division 1 tick.
And let's just make sure that that's where I want to split by hitting space and listening. Yeah, that's exactly where. So, Command T to split.
Split region /events at play at position.
Now we're going to go to the inspector.
Inspector. And region 808 table. And punch mute loop. Quantize. Has alternate items.
We're looking for the quantize.
1/16 note. Has alternate items.
And it's quantizing at 1/16 notes.
Quantize. Has alternate items.
I'm going to change the algorithm to smart
Many smart quantize. Has alternate items.
and see what it does. There we go. That's a lot better.
Out of. Tracks.
Now I'm going to go ahead and hide the inspector with the I.
Inspector off.
And Command D to duplicate this track.
Track. New track with duplicate settings.
And we'll call it snare.
808. Selection replaced. S.
I just did Shift Return to rename the track, type in my name, and hit Enter. So now we're on the snare track.
Snare. Dialog. Snare. Dialog. Table. Sound category. Kicks. Selected. And table. Sound category. Kicks. Selected. Sound category. Kicks.
So now we're going to go ahead and switch it to snare and claps.
Menu check snares and claps. Sound module. Snappy snare.
Yeah, let's try the snappy snare.
Musical typing. Snare. Dialog.
And let's go ahead and record something with this. And go ahead and quantize that.
Quantize selected region /cell /events.
Let's go ahead and correct that last bar real quick. Command K to get rid of musical typing. Command W to close this window.
Untitled. Logics.
Go to the end of the region with Control End.
9 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
This time I think we'll just go back a bar.
8 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick.
Split here. Command T.
Split region / events at play at position.
I to show the inspector.
Inspector on. Out of tracks. Out of inspector. And region snare table. And 1/16 no quantize. Has alternate items.
Let's see if Smart Quantize will do it.
Smart quantize. Has alternate items.
If not, then I'll just try one of the triplets. Yeah, still didn't do what I wanted it to do.
Menu classic quantize.
So back to classic quantize, and now
1/16 menu check mark. 1/16 1/1/1/8 triplet 1/12.
we'll do 1/8 triplets.
1/8 triplet 1/12. Has alternate items.
There we go.
Out of tracks.
Alright, out of that, and then
Inspector off.
hide the inspector. So now let's go ahead and tweak the snare. I'm going to set my cycle length to 8 bars instead of the default 4 bars that we get when we start new projects. So I'm going to go to 9 bars and hit Command Option right bracket.
9 bars 1 beat 1 division 1 tick. Set right locator by playhead.
And now when I cycle this by hitting C,
Toggle cycle mode on.
we'll have this entire loop selected. So now when I'm adjusting settings, I can hear what's going on and I don't have to worry about hitting space to repeat sections and things like that. Command Option Grove.
Snare. Dialog. Snare. Dialog. Tone 75.0%. 75%.
In this case, tone is basically just adjusting how bright you want your snare to be. 0 is a darker snare with a little bit of noise introduced, and 100 is pretty bright.
In 75, 80%, 80, 95, 100%.
So, that's 100,
95,
that's 0.
5%, 90%, 95%, 90%, 100%. 1 bar.
And you see how it just looped? Cycle's useful for doing that. I think I like 90 on this one, so we'll just stick with 90.
90%.
It's bright, but it's not too bright.
Out of. Tone. Body 89.8%. 89.8%. And 89.8 and slider.
The body is basically how much of a mid you want in your snare. So if we bring this down to 0,
And slider 84.
you see it just sounds very thin. Let's add some meat to this snare.
5%. 95, 60%. 55, 40%. 45. 1 bar.
I think I like 100 actually.
Out of. Dirt 0.0%. 0%.
And dirt's just adding bit reduction to this.
In 0%. And slider.
So at 0, it's clean, and at 100, it's bit reduced.
5%. 25%.
And a little bit of dirt goes a long way, so we'll go ahead and put it at 30
30%. 1 bar 1 beat.
and kind of just adjust.
30, 40%. 30, 20, 20%. 25%, 30%. 25%.
I think I like 25.
Out of. Decay 21.5%.
And decay, just as before, controls how long the snare should be.
In 21.5 and slider 16.
So at 0%,
1 bar 1.
it's very short.
5%.
At 100, it's very long. At least for these types of snares. Let's go ahead and move it to
95.
0, and then just start moving it up until we feel it sounds good.
5%. 10%. 15%. 10%. 5%.
For this, I'll keep it short.
Out of flight volume 0 decibels. 75%.
I don't think we need to worry about volume.
Key tracking checked.
We have a key tracking, so if we really wanted to,
The musical type.
we could do something like... If we turn it off, we can get the original sample.
Unchecked. Checked.
I like it with the key tracking on. I like that lower pitch snare.
Mode. Mono.
In this instance, the mode doesn't really matter, so we'll just go ahead and close this window.
Tracks. Untitled. Logics. Untitled. Tracks. Window.
Duplicate this track
Track. New track with duplicate settings.
with Command D.
Snare. Content selected.
Shift return to rename the track, and we'll call it Hats.
Selection replaced. H.
Command Option Graph to open up this window.
Hats. Dialog. Hats. Dialog. Table. Sound category. Snares and claps. Selected. And table. Sound category. Snares and claps. Selected. Sound category, snares and claps.
Okay, so now we want to switch to hats and cymbals.
Menu check mark, hats and symbols. Sound category, hats and symbols.
Alright.
Sound module, crash cymbal.
We're on a cymbal by default, so we want...
Menu check mark, smooth hi-hat.
Let's go ahead and try the smooth hi-hat for now. I'm going to go ahead and close this window real quick.
Untitled, Logic.
With Command W, bring up Note Repeater with Control Option Return.
Note repeat, dialog. Note repeat, button.
Hit this first button here to expand everything.
Rate 1/6 velocity. As played image. Gate 90% image. Button.
And to this other first button here for the mod wheel. That's how we're going to control our repeater rate. VO N to where it says
Key remote.
Key remote. VO left arrow a couple of times.
Button.
VO space on that button, which enables the triplets. If we don't click any of these buttons, it'll just be straight notes. Let's go ahead and set the minimum value to 1/8.
Button 1 min 0. Min offset 1/16 note. Menu 1/8 note. 1/8 note.
And go ahead and Command Grav.
Untitled. Logics. Untitled. Tracks. Window. Tracks header.
And now.
Musical typing. Hats. Dialog.
There we go. Let's go ahead and record something in. Now that we got that recorded, let's go ahead and hit Command K. And then to get rid of our note repeat window, Command Option Return. Now let's open up the instrument window with Command Option Grav.
Hats. Dialog. Hats. Dialog. Table. Sound and table. Sound category. Hats and symbol.
VO N to the table. Interact with it.
Tone. 63.1%. 63.1%.
In this case, tone is literally the pitch of this because it's just white noise.
And 63.1% slider. 50. 5%. 95. 5%. 70. 60. 15%. 20%. 50%. 40%. 35%. 30%.
Yeah, I think I like 30% on this one.
Out of flight attack. 0.0%. 0%.
The attack is pretty self-explanatory. At 0, we get the very snappy transient.
And 0% slider.
Whilst at 100,
5%. 85%. 90, 95. 100%.
it smoothly comes in. You know what? I think I kind of like that.
95. 60%. 55%. 50%. 5%. 55%. 60%. 95.
Well, we'll keep it at 0 for now.
Out of slider. Dirt. 0.0%. 0.00%. And slider.
As with the snare, a little bit of dirt goes a long way.
5%. 15%. 20%. 25%. 30%. 35. 70%. 60. 40%. 35. 30%.
So as you can hear, as we get to 30%, it actually starts to color this hi-hat. As you heard before, around 15 to 20, 25%, the definition of that attack gets a lot stronger.
25%.
Let's move to 25 and kind of move in between 10 to 25%, see what we like.
50, 10, 5%. 10%.
Too far down.
15%. 20%. 15%. 20%. 25%. 15%.
I think I like 15 the best.
Out of slider character, 90.0%, 90%.
Character tends to make this thicker and thinner. I'll show you what I mean.
In 90%, and slider, 100%.
We're at 100%. Here, as you can tell, it's what we've been listening to this whole time. Its original value is 87. So if we move it down to 0,
95.
see it just kind of got a little thin. It took out some of those mids.
5%, 75%, 70%, 80%, 70%.
Yeah, I think I like it at 70. So,
out of slider crush, 26.3.
Let's move to the next control, which is crush.
In 26.3% in slider.
So as you can see, it says 26.3%, so let's go ahead and move it down to 0 so you can hear how it sounds.
21.
Wow, it got a lot quieter, so let's move it back up to like, I don't know, 30.
5, 10%, 15%, 20%, 25%, 30%, 35%, 40%.
And just nudge it forward.
45%, 50%, 55%, 60%, 65%.
Yeah, we're starting to really distort that. Let's move it down
60,
to
25%.
25, which is, percent and some change less.
30%.
I think I kind of like 30.
35%.
At 35. Let's leave it at 35 for now.
Out of slider. Decay. 22.2%. 22.2% slider.
And just as before, decay is the release. For this type of music, usually
17.
these hats have a really short decay. So let's put it at 0 and see how it sounds.
5%.
And in this case, a little goes a long way. Let's move it to 100, just so you can hear how it sounds.
10%. 95.
Oh, that is piercing. Okay. At that point, it becomes an open hi-hat.
5%.
Alright, so let's keep it at 5%. I really like that.
Out of slider. Volume. 0. Test mode. Mono.
And these last two controls really don't matter. Volume and mode.
Untitled. Logics. Untitled.
Let's close this window with Command W, Command D
Track. New track with duplicates.
to duplicate this track. And we're going to do Shift Return to rename it and call it Melodic Perk. Enter to confirm.
Track 3 hats. Track 4 melodic perk.
And same deal. We're going to open up the window again. Command Option Grov.
Melodic perk. Dialog. Melodic perk. Dialog table. Sound category. Hats and symbols.
Alright, interact with that table. And let's go find the percussion.
Menu checkmark. Percussion. Sound category. Percussion. Sound module. Deep tom. Musical typing. Melodic perk.
So the deep tom sounds like this. So let's switch it
Menu
to
checkmark. Deep membrane. 80s cowbell.
80s cowbell.
Sound category. Percussion. Musical typing. Melodic perk.
This is what it sounds like. Let's go ahead and lay something down. Cue to quantize.
Quantize selected region /cell /events.
And play. Let's go fix that. It's still on the triplet from earlier, so if we put it to 1/16, it should fix it. Command K to close musical typing, Command W to close this window.
Untitled. Logics. Inspector on.
I to show the inspector.
Out of inspector. And reach melodic perk. Table. Row 3 of 8. Quant and table. Row 3 of 8. 1/8 triplet. 1/12. Has alternate items.
There's our problem.
Commit 1/off. 1/2 note. 1/8 note. 1/16. 1/16 note.
So let's see if 1/16 will do it. Okay.
Out. Tracks. Inspector off.
Uninteract. I to hide the inspector.
Melodic perk.
Command Option
Melodic
Graph
perk.
to bring
Dialog.
up the instrument window.
Table. Sound category. Percussion. Selected.
And let's go ahead and tweak this.
And table. Sound pitch. 0. 50 tone. 82.0%. 82%. And slider.
In this case, tone adjusts the brightness. So, this is at 0, and then we're going to move it to 100.
5%. 95. 10%. 45%. 50. 55%. 60%.
I kind of like it at 60.
Out of. Tone. 60.0%. 60%.
So let's go ahead and move on.
Body. 0.0%. 0%.
So we have body at 0%, and it sounds very plucky.
1 bar. And 0%. And slider.
So let's go ahead and move it up.
5%. 45%. 50%. 95. 40%. 35%. 30%. 20%. 30%. 40%. 30%.
So the body's more or less adjusting the sustain. So as the decay, I'll show you what I mean when I get down to the decay control.
Saturation. 85.1%. 85.1%. 85.1. And slider.
Saturation, same deal as before.
94. 95. 5%. 70%. 70. 100%. 90%.
Except in this situation, it really does need it. Otherwise, it'll get really quiet. So we'll leave it at 90.
Out of slider. Out of. Harmonic. 54.5%. 54.5% slider.
Harmonic is basically adjusting the second note that you can hear. So if we move it to 100,
59.
it's the octave.
95.
If we move it to 0, you literally just have two waveforms on top of each other. Let's put it at 55 to keep it in that fifth
5%. 50%.
configuration.
55%. Out of slider. Out of. Decay 23.1%. 23.1%.
Let's go ahead and show you what the decay does alongside the body.
In 23.1%. In slider. 18.
So as you can hear, at 0, it is very plucky.
5%. 60%. 60. 45%. 40%. 35%. 30%.
The body kind of adjusts the sustain, and the decay is more or less how long it's being sustained for. Let's go ahead and over-exaggerate this and put it at 100.
35. Out of. Harmonic saturate body 30 point in 30%. In slider.
And move to the body and put it at 0, just for exaggeration's sake.
25.
I actually kind of like that.
5%. 50%. 55%. 60%. 67, 70, 80, 85, 90, 95, 100. 95.
That happens. So let's go ahead and
Out of. Harmonic 50 decay 100% slider.
adjust that decay a little bit, because I do like the body at 0, but the decay is still a little too long.
85%. 80%.
There we go.
Out of flat volume 0 decibels. Key tracking checked.
These controls don't really matter,
Mode mono. Key tracking checked.
but here, I'll disable the key tracking so you guys can hear how it sounds.
Unchecked.
Let's turn it back on and say we never did that.
Checked.
Okay,
Untitled. Logics.
we now have our beat,
1 bar 1 beat 1 division 1 toggle cycle mode off.
and I'll toggle cycle mode off and disable the click,
Metronome off.
and now I'll just go ahead and play the beat. And that is it for this drum synth tutorial. Now, Apple does say you can further process these sounds because they are very, very dry. This is one of those drum synths that just no frills, no fancy reverbs. You do get some effects, but it's more or less to shape the sound of your kit piece. For instance, let's go ahead and add reverb to this cowbell.
Untitled. Lock and melodic perk. Setting chain off. Manipulative drum synth. Audio occlusion.
So let's go to
Menu check mark. No plugin.
reverb.
Recent. Reverb. Reverb. Chromaverb. Chromaverb. Stereo. Melodic perk. Dialogue. Melodic perk. Dialogue.
And I like chromaverb usually, so let's see how this sounds by default. Well, too much reverb. If, we turn down the wet control to like 10, I think it'd be alright. Let's try this preset here. I think I like that.
Mixer. Tracks.
Command W to close those windows. Just as an example, you could do processing of that nature. Of course, usually with reverbs, you want to put them on sends. You can add further EQ and compression and, some more distortion, some saturation, whatever you want. The kick, for example, you could keep the 808 kick as a very clean kick and then add your own saturation, say with like a third-party plugin like Blackbox from Plugin Alliance, and you can get some interesting colorations with that. I hope you guys found this video informative. I'd like to thank the Warrior Monster for allowing me to present once again. As he always says,